Hi there, I'm an explosive barrel and I like to blow up. Today we'll be playing Oops, Sorry Daddy. Oh, wait, I'm actually being told it's called Forgive Me, Father. Yeah, that makes more sense.
The game was developed by Byte Barrel, who, alas, does not have a Wikipedia page. However, they do have another game under their belt. It's a Mythbusters game which does not appear to be a cash grab and actually looks well put together. However, the trailer does feature an amalgamation of Jamie and Adam, which I find deeply terrifying.
Before we get into the game, we have to have a little chat. See, I had this whole spiel prepared about how I initially started on hard and then switched back to normal. However, the game had a little built-in hard mode just for me. Starting at level 1 and getting progressively worse as the game went on, my gun just wouldn't fire sometimes. I tried everything. 2 different controllers, 2 different mice, an external keyboard, and a fresh install later I realized the only thing that would fix it was pausing the game. So, I did this several times. On the final level I actually switched to easy mode because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to beat the game. And what you're seeing is actually just the times I survived it, not the times that it killed me, which was a lot. I'm actually stretching out what I have to say so that I can meet the end of the supercut of how many times my gun didn't fire. I don't know if this is an isolated problem, but I didn't find anything on the net, and I don't tinker with files.
Just to be safe.
But how is the game, though? Well, in my opinion, it's like if the remake of 13 had a nightmare and also didn't suck shit. Forgive Me, Father is a powerhouse of style, and in my opinion is retro in mechanics alone. I could pull any Lovecraftian comic book off of my shelf and see the inspiration for the game as clear as day. Each stage, at least at this point in early access, is pretty varied. You don't have to look far to find something new and unique. I have no clue how they did such badass lightning, but I fucking love it.
I was absolutely blown away by the echo effect in the temple level. So unique, so fucking awesome.
Do I say fuck a lot? I feel like I do. Yeah, well, fuck it anyway. The enemies are standard affair, but in a good way. The first enemies you encounter are called wretches, zombies with a neat little trick up their sleeves. Sometimes they carry around an extra head, and when you shoot the first one off, they put another one on. Then you have the fat fish, bisected gangsters that without a headshot turn into ankle biters. After that, there are the liquidators that appear as cops, nurses, and soldiers, and are your first projectile enemies. There are your fishers, which throw explosive fish for some reason. The patients are a fine addition as well, but after the first time you encounter them, their wind-up is usually enough to dispatch them before they're a problem. I'm not saying they're not cool, but it might be better if I had less of a chance to stick a shotgun in their mouth before they attack. The ghouls are a bit slow for my taste as well, but I'm a big fan of the fact that when you kill them, they drop their own tombstone into the ground. This is the only appearance of the teleporting Dark Bane enemy, but I get the feeling that after the game comes out of early access, we'll be seeing a lot more of it. That is, if the enemy isn't considered some sort of mini-boss. The Martyr is an enemy spawner which I expected to show up much earlier in the game, because up until this point, enemies are either hidden in monster closets or simply teleport in. The yellow cultists have seeking projectiles. And these fucking guys, man, they're always going on about their fucking boss. Oh, the king in yellow, he's so awesome, he dresses so cool, he's such a good kisser.
I don't want to hear that shit.
Next up, we have the sewer creatures, which appear in a swamp and not a sewer, and are pretty much a complete non-issue. We also have the swamp man and the forest cultist, which are just variations of the liquidator in a 3-shot, and the yellow cultist with a heavy-hitting round. And last but not least, we have the gobbler, who's fine as an enemy, but whose name I despise. Now it's time to talk about the fun stuff, the guns. What's good? What's bad? What's best? First up is the pistol, and right away let me say, go ahead and get that dual wield skill. Trust me, it will serve you well. Next up is the shotgun, and it's the real breadwinner here. It's as OP as you want, and once you get the tentacle upgrade, it really starts to kick ass.
That tasty reload animation would make Doomslayer and Caleb proud. The Thompson machine gun is a solid workhorse, but I will say without the accuracy upgrade it does go kind of wild. Still though, it's a good killing machine. You have a knife as well, but to be honest, you're only going to use it when you switch to it by accident. The MP18 isn't a bad gun, but I switched it to an explosive weapon almost immediately. However, I will say after I did that, I didn't much care for the bounce mechanics of the explosive rounds. Last but not least, we have the spear gun, which as of right now in early access, you have just enough time with to fall in love.
It's single shot and slow to reload, but its range is incredible and will kill just about anything in one shot. With the exception of the Crabman, who you see so few times, I really felt it was a non-issue and wasn't even worthy of mentioning in the enemy roster.
Yes, I'm aware that there are new levels, enemies, and guns, such as the risk you run when you review an early access game. I promise when the game is finished, I will review them all.
Since you've come with me this far, let's talk story and levels. This is my first real gripe about the game. The story also serves as a collectible element. So, rather than having the story delivered to you, you have to find the story, which, in theory, isn't bad, but in practice doesn't quite work out the way I'd like. Story elements became muddled along the way in my mind to a point where I'm genuinely concerned that I'm going to mess up some of the elements of the storytelling here. So I'm going to keep it as brief as possible. You play as Father Martin, a man in search of his missing cousin who appears to have been investigating a shadowy cabal of powerful figures attempting to control and/or destroy the world. The first level takes place in a tenement building as the father realizes he's the only person unaffected by the rapidly spreading undeath and insanity. I have to say I love the apartment building as a first level because you can tell that the world is really going to open up and you're just getting your first taste of it.
This is also a fine introduction to how much this game loves Easter eggs. You've got a little bit of The Shining here, a bit of Fallen Aces and One Piece over there, and so on. I think I've even found one that hasn't been marked yet. The inscription in the temple level specifically mentions Evelyn and Rick, and if I'm not mistaken, those are the main characters in The Mummy. Anyways, back to the levels. Soon enough you're introduced to the hallway and then arena mechanic of the game, which is about as retro as they come, and it's very commonplace in Forgive Me Father.
After you've made your way through the apartment building, you emerge into the second level, the garden. This is the first time you get a splash of color with the game's excellent lighting, and I felt it gave a welcome little pop to the level design.
However, the garden also introduces something of a recurring problem in the game. Some of the secrets aren't hidden at all. That's not to say that I found everything, I didn't. But this is one of the worst examples of a blatant secret that I've ever seen. Next up we have the streets. I love any game where you get a sense that the dead are out in force, taking over. But what I love more about this level is how well it highlights the soundtrack. The music in Forgive Me Father fucking kicks. Listen to this. That's some shit straight out of Blasphemous. And minutes later you're shredding enemies to a metal track that makes you want to square up and take on all comers. Here's a little chef's kiss for you, Forgive Me Father. From the streets we move to the rooftops and then the underground, and while I love the rooftops and the accompanying lighting, I felt a little visually bored below ground surrounded by darkness and gray concrete. Personally, I didn't feel the harbor was much to look at either beyond introducing the fisher, but the real standout is the next level, the hospital. I'll admit I'm biased because I love a good hospital level. Brightening up a horror game with varied color and stark contrasts is important to me. And after the browns and greens of the harbor, the bright whites and wood grain really caught my eye. The hospital arena was a ton of fun too, even despite my controller difficulties. Finally, in level 7, we reach our first boss, Catharsis. I really like the feel of the fight here. You've got a stationary boss which feels pretty traditional to me, as does its behemoth size taking up one whole end of the arena. The design itself is firmly rooted in Lovecraftian horror, and in this instance I'm glad it wasn't an enemy that resembled any kind of humanoid form. I even found myself a little surprised at the use of the jump as a dodge mechanic for one of the attacks. Overall, as far as bosses go, I liked it. I feel Catharsis served as a waypoint for when the game increased in difficulty and didn't baby you as much with checkpoints.
On to level 8, which is the cemetery. I hate to be a downer after heaping on so much praise, but I felt that this was the first level where I got bored. There's just something retreaded about it.
Frankly, I've seen a million cemeteries, and I've rocked them all. If it wasn't for the lightning effect I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't have anything to say at all. After the cemetery, we come to the graveyard, and I didn't feel much for this level either. I didn't hate it. I don't dislike any of it. But if you put the gardens and the graveyard side by side, they feel very comparable. I felt like I was going through the motions just to get to the next piece of larger, more inspired material, and that's never a positive feeling. Speaking of inspired material, we come to the temple, and this is where Forgive Me Father gets back to the heart of its atmosphere. The level pulls off the claustrophobic feeling of being stuck underground while elevating the enemy count so that you're often surrounded on all sides, even outside of arenas. I have to say, without examining the newly added levels, this is my favorite so far. The next level is the swamp, and it's, well, a swamp. I didn't hate it or love it. I'm indifferent to swamps. What more can I say than that? It felt moist? Not as moist as your sister, but yeah, moist. Finally, we come to the caves, and I really can't give the game enough credit for its lighting. I've groaned a little about being bored, but the use of alternating muted and bright colors from level to level and even area to area is a fucking treat. Certain areas just grab your eye. This isn't some Quake 2 brown on gray on muted orange bullshit. I didn't mention the lantern mechanic because it's criminally underutilized, but I hope as Bite Barrel moves forward with the game, there's a perk that lets you hang it from your gun or something, because these guys know what they're doing when it comes to the vitality of dark and light. Last but certainly not fucking least, we have the final boss battle of Early Access, Aziz. The mechanics here are clever, and you don't get to just run and gun your way through the battle like you did with the first boss. You have to constantly move to avoid Aziz's arena-encompassing force field walls, while also simultaneously kicking the asses of some priests and taking down the altars maintaining the force field. Even with my firing difficulties, I really loved that the fight stepped away from pray and spray and made you work a little harder for it. On a higher difficulty, you're going to get chewed up in this fight your first 5 or 10 tries. However, I did leave one last thing out. How were the explosions and jibs? Well,
Let me show you.
wait, no!
Look how they massacred my boy.
Seriously though, in my opinion, this is one of those rare cases where you don't have to wait for the game to come out of early access to really enjoy it. I say strike while the iron is still hot and cheap, and pick up Forgive Me Father for yourself. I'll catch you in the next one, my disciples. Remember, if you want to worship at the altar of the barrel, like, subscribe,
And don't forget to hit that bell.